Hey everyone, and welcome to day 3 of CBM Calling, a Facebook live chat that CBM is doing every day at 2:30 Eastern, trying to keep connected with our constituency in Canada and try to offer some helpful information on how God is at work through the church around the world and here in Canada. Today, our calls with Randy Stanton, regional rep for Atlantic Canada, based in New Glasgow, and Renée MacVicar. I said her name, good friend of mine, pastors at Hillside Moncton as associate pastor for Community Engagement, right?
You got it.
How are things with both of you? How are things going in this new reality of social distancing and self-isolation?
Yeah, it's a new reality for sure. I think a lot of us pastors and leaders have found this last week. Lots of change, everything new dreaming, new thinking, having to do everything differently and communicate differently. And so it's been a busy week for all of us, big decisions. And like everyone else, I'm working home and kids are home from school. And so, yeah, it's a new reality for all of us.
For sure. Randy, you and Heather doing well?
Yes, yeah, the new reality certainly has hit. I was pleasantly on the road on last Sunday, preached my little heart out, and then went on and did some other meetings and stuff. But then all of a sudden, like, that's no more. And so it's been I slide back home as quick as I could and sort of went into just a quiet zone. But it is a brand new reality, and yet people are pretty optimistic, and we're trying to find our way through it. I've been appreciating that so much as I talk to people.
Yeah, that's great. For most of us, maybe for many of us, this would be week 2. So the second weekend of churches not gathering in person. For others, this is probably week 1. And probably there's very few of our churches that are still gathering on Sunday morning. I mentioned yesterday in the call with John, when we were talking about how this has affected our partners, I mentioned a tweet and I went and looked it up, wanted to quote it, the full thing. It's by Hannah Bartlett, who one of the pastors at Cornerstone and PEI. And she tweeted and said, "Church is not canceled. Church services and large gatherings are canceled, but the church itself is still very much happening right now, anywhere God's people are praying for, taking precautions for, sacrificing for, and serving one another in word and deed." And I just thought that was such a great word for us as we're not meeting in person. Maybe, in fact, this is a way to help us discover that the church is not a church service, but really the church is the people serving each other and serving our world. So in this conversation, just wanted to give opportunity for you, Randy, to share what you're seeing in Atlantic Canada as a whole and how you're connecting with churches, and Renée very specifically be able to help us understand how, one church has addressed these conversations.
Well, like most of you, I'm not seeing very much because I'm sort of driving from home to a very small office that I have downtown. I go through one public door and then I'm into my offices. So I see some people around, but it's about a quarter the size of the parking lot, the people that come in. So it's pretty quiet. But when I get on the phones, I start to see and hear some really interesting things. One of the lines that I ran into on Facebook, it was called the Gospel According to Facebook, but it was kind of funny. It just said, pray for your pastor. He's never done this before either, or she's never been involved in this before. And I appreciated that, because when I called the pastors the first couple of days there, it's like, I would say, "How are you doing?" They said, "We don't know. We've never been here before." And I think that's a reality that I'm so glad to hear our pastors are humble about, but they're working their way through. They're trying new things, and they're networking in amazing ways. And that's a neat thing to see too. They're looking at very hard realities, of course, and they're trying to figure out how to best serve their people. I love the way some of them are doing it. Creative new ideas. I think I saw one of our missionaries had put up, and it was a church, and it had a whole bunch of clothing out on the pews, and it set out like a pair of pants and a shirt and a little hat on top, just to say, hey, if I'm preaching today, this is who I'm preaching to. These are real people. And others have put pictures up just to remind them that they're helping their congregation, be it through internet or whatever. Second thing, of course, all the cancellations have been really kind of a challenge. And Jesus to the Nation, a very large gathering here in Halifax, was canceled. But they just took on the view and they said, no, we're going to do it online and we'll see what we can do. And so that's definitely given me an opportunity to figure out, okay, how am I going to camera myself and photograph it and send in something, and it's good times. Yeah. So, we're doing what we can, and it's interesting to see how everybody's working it out.
Yeah, I think, in fact, canceling the gathering, the church gathering, actually is a way of serving our community as we work together to plank the curve, as our chief medical officer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Renée, how at Hillside are you helping church families stay connected?
Yeah. Love what you just said, realizing that canceling the church service doesn't mean church isn't happening. Great quote from Hannah. And part of what we're asking is, how do we love Jesus and love like Jesus in this season? So starting with our church family. And so what's interesting is we just launched a vision called Beyond Our Walls, talking about loving our city, loving our neighbors. And little did we know we'd have everything literally beyond our walls and not be able to meet in our building. And so with our church family, yes, we're doing things like many churches to have our services online. And some churches can do that live stream. Some are recording that. Some can't do that. But what we've told like our small group leaders is just do something to connect with others, whether that's on Zoom or FaceTime or Skype or a text or a phone, good old fashioned phone call. Do something to connect with your church family, because this is isolating for all of us. And we need each other to get each other through this time. My husband, Joe, and I actually had an encouraging visit with seniors the other night when we dropped off groceries to them, and they stood inside their house on one side of the living room window, and we were outside on the other side of the living room window, and we had a great visit through the window. And amazing how encouraging it was just to see their faces in real life. And so do something to keep groups connected. Another thing we've done in our church family that many churches could do is we just made a list of who's vulnerable in this situation. And so we made a list of those 65 plus who we think could really use a phone call, made a list of those that are vulnerable, and just started dividing them up of who can call them. And so making lists and start calling.
Yeah, that's great. I know one of the themes that we've been trying to get across through these Facebook Live broadcasts and even in Terry's initial video is how in this time of difficulty, in this crisis really, how do we help the church think of others? How do we, because really that's when times like this are when the church can be at its best.
Yeah. Yeah,
Certainly.
That's part of what we're trying to do is mobilize the church to be its best. And so on our website, we created two really simple tabs. One is give help, one is need help. And so if you need help in the COVID-19 situation, maybe you need an encouraging phone call, or you have a prayer request, you need an essential errand done or a care package, you fill that out. But the other tab is that you're willing to give help and give one of the encouraging phone calls or go and do an essential errand. And so mobilizing each other to be good neighbors to each other.
Yeah, it'll be great to see just how God is at work through his people at this time. I know, Randy, most of the ways that you usually work to connect people with what God's doing around the world involves visiting in person, speaking in churches, coffee with people, sharing the story of God being at work. How are you adapting in this time? How do you keep telling the story of the local church around the world?
Yeah. Well, when Executive Director, when Terry Smith sent out an email earlier on, he said, make sure you stay in touch with the field staff that are out and around the world. And so I've started my day last couple of days sending an email straight out to them saying, okay, so what's going on in your world? And I've received a couple back, just really encouraging to hear that certain programs are still going, others are not. Farmers can get in the field, but some things aren't happening. And so I was really pleased to get that information, because what I've been doing is calling pastors here locally and donors and other people and just saying, hey, this is what's going on. How are you doing? And this is something I just heard today and I thought was kind of cool. And to be able to share stories. So that's been encouraging. And I think just coming alongside people with this story, the story keeps going. No matter what's happening, no matter how quiet we are here, they're running the same story around the world. And so we have a great thing to share and to just keep encouraged, because most of our churches, most of our people have supported those ministries over the years, and for them to know that, okay, our friends overseas are still okay, and the church is continuing on over there, and it's in the best way it can too. So
Yeah,
it's good to encourage. Yeah,
important to tell the story. Always
absolutely.
be focusing on the good things that God is doing in the midst of a time of crisis. And I'm sure, Renee, as you think of Moncton, there's all kinds of good things that God is doing through his people at this time. Do you have any particular things you can think of to share, of highlights where you've seen God at work?
Yeah. One of the things we've seen happen is people really wanting to encourage healthcare workers. And so our church just signed cards for all the healthcare workers that we knew of and sent them Tim's cards. So that's pretty neat. I've seen in neighborhoods organizing like scavenger hunts for the kids, where each day of the week they encourage kids to make like homemade flowers and put them in the window. And then when they go for a walk, they count how many homemade flowers did they see in the window. And so neighborhoods coming together that way to encourage each other. People even just signaling and saying to each other, it's okay if things look different right now. Like other parents saying to parents, it's okay if your house looks like a giant fort right now. and just giving each other encouragement that, yes, things look different and we're in this together. We're going to get through it together. And then I think of all that people are doing for the vulnerable in our community right now. And when you think about it, there's quite a few people that are vulnerable in this situation. Yes, seniors and those with compromised health, but also just folks that live alone and how isolating this is right now. Anyone with mental health issues, anyone that has to isolate themselves for 14 days after traveling internationally. There's a lot of vulnerable. And so doing extra things in the community to reach out and connect with them. And then think of organizations like shelters or for the homeless or food banks, or those that normally depend on school breakfast or lunch programs. Those places are having to rethink things very differently at this time. And so, as churches, we can ask, hey, rather trying to reinvent the wheel, how do we help them? Whether that's giving them money, or is there people that are willing to volunteer in what they're doing or drop off non-perishable food? How can we encourage them at an incredibly difficult time? So amazing to see some things happening.
Yeah. So if you're watching, you probably have all kinds of great ideas too.
Yeah,
so post them in the comments. We want to hear how your church, your community, the local expression of God's people in your place, how you are joining God in reaching people in your neighborhoods and in the global neighborhood. How are you remembering to pray for the vulnerable in places where they don't have healthcare like we do? We'd love to hear your ideas so that together as the church in Canada, we can really be serving others in this difficult time. I know one thing that I've seen, even I know at my church, King's Community in Oakville, our pastor has started doing live streams. Or I know others, I know, Renee, you're doing taped.
Tape services at this point.
That's digitally recorded services. I know a number of our churches might not have that capability. I'd encourage you to partner with another church in your neighborhood who is, or just to kind of do a teaser here for something CBM's offering to people. We meet every week for chapel as a staff to pray for one another and to focus on God's word. And last year we had a Lent series led by Jean Templemeyer on empire versus kingdom. Just a brilliant teaching on God's word. And we're going to make that available starting tomorrow on social media and our website for people to join and participate in if you don't have another means to join with your local church. Or maybe you can do both. It's a great resource that we're making available. And then CBM Calling's back on Monday afternoon, same time, 2:30 Eastern, 4 o'clock Newfoundland time. Terry Smith, our executive director, and Ali Haddad, based in Beirut, our MENA team leader, will be sharing how the church there is dealing with this crisis. I think time's up, but thanks, Renée, for joining us. Thanks, Randy.
Good to be here.
Good to be here.
Serve the church in Atlantic Canada. And to each of you, may your church family, may we all be known as, you're the people who cared for others during that crisis.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Proclaim and demonstrate the gospel in word and deed. So thanks. Talk to you later.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye.